It's time to make it, just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Welcome to this episode of You Can Make It with David Farrell, the old fat guy. That's me. I'm going to make something classy today. I'm going to make croissants. Croissants sound like something so elegant. You could just see yourself on the Champs-Élysées in a little cafe having a croissant for a petit déjeuner. However, they always seem too hard to make. I've got a couple of tricks that makes it easier, and I'm going to show you that if you just follow it step by step, it's not that hard. We'll start off with copious quantities of wine taken internally, my favorite first ingredient. So good. Now we started off by measuring 1.5 cups or 375 milliliters of flour. Now I will tell you, if you're going to measure flour by volume, it's real important you don't just scoop it out because it packs down and you'll end up with too much. You have to sift it into a container and then even it off. Much better is to weigh it. So what I have here is that amount of flour comes out to 190 grams or 6 3/8 ounces. So I do recommend you use weight. It's just more accurate. Now I put 1/3 of that flour in the bowl. Don't worry about it being exact. But I just dumped 1/3 in. Rough third's fine. The next thing I'm going to add is 40 milliliters or 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This gives a different structure to the croissant that I think you'll like. Now 40 ounces is 3 tablespoons or 26.5 grams of cornstarch. So we'll just dump that in there. And the problem with cornstarch is it sticks. So make sure you scrape it all in. It's just so fine. It's like baby powder. So there we go. We got the cornstarch all in. Now I'm going to add to that 2 more dry ingredients, which are 7 milliliters of yeast, or if you want to do it by weight, that's 6 grams or 1.5 teaspoons in US measures. And also have 3 milliliters or 1/2 teaspoon or 4 grams of salt. And I have 15 milliliters or a tablespoon of sugar, which weighs about 15 grams. So we'll just add those to the other dry ingredients. And then we'll just stir them together. Okay, now we need to add just some liquid ingredients. So what I'm going to add here is I have 125 milliliters of milk, and I have in that 25 milliliters or 2 tablespoons of butter. So 1/2 cup of milk and 2 tablespoons of butter, or 125 milliliters of milk and 25 milliliters of butter. I'm going to put this in the microwave just to warm it up for 40 seconds to a minute. I'm looking for an internal temperature of between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit that I'll measure. But if you don't have a thermometer, just stick your finger in. If it feels warm, it'll be fine. So I heated up the milk, and you'll notice the butter isn't totally melted. That's just fine. I'm just going to put both of them in with that dry ingredients I'd mixed together. And I'm going to put the paddle attachment on my stand mixer. You can do this with a spoon too. It's just a lot more work. Just go and let it mix for 2 minutes. So I've mixed this for 2 minutes. Now I'm just going to scrape the bowl down, get all the flour that went up on the edge. And I'm going to add a 2/3 of the flour, or half of what I have left here, to that. Just put half in. Again, don't worry about being exact. You just want to be sort of. Now, I'm going to take an egg, and I want to beat it. So I'll just crack an egg into my bowl here. And we'll just give it a quick beat with a whip. There we are. Once we've got it beaten up, we only want to use half the egg in this mixture, but we want the other half because we're going to use it tomorrow. So I'm just going to put half the egg into a bowl. I'll cover that with some plastic wrap, and we'll use it tomorrow. So we'll just put the half in there. Now we just want to mix that with the flour we added until it's combined. So we'll just turn our mixer on here. Okay, that's pretty good. So we'll lift that up. Now what we want to do is scrape this mixer off. And scrape the bowl down. Get the stuff off the sides again. Now, what we're going to do is take the beater off, the beating paddle off of the mixer, and we're going to replace it with the dough hook. And we're going to put that on. And we're going to add the remaining flour. And we're going to just put this on low. Now this is going to mix until it starts to form a ball around the dough hook. There we go. See, it's just starting to form into a ball now, and it's catching up on the dough hook. So from now, we want to knead this with the dough hook for 7 minutes. So we've kneaded this for 7 minutes. You can go 7 or 8. If you don't have a stand mixer, you could have mixed it together with the 2 first ones, put it on the counter, add the last third of the flour, and then kneaded it by hand till it formed a ball, and then kneaded for 7 or 8 minutes with your hands. Stand mixer is just a lot easier. So you'll see that the dough has cleaned the sides of the bowl and forms a nice satiny finished ball. That's just what you're looking for. Now just form it into a ball, put it back in the bowl, and we're going to cover this with a towel and let it rest for 10 minutes. It just makes it easier to work with. So just take your bowl, put a towel over it, and do nothing for 10 minutes. Our dough has rested for 10 minutes, so now it's time to start layering it. In the old days, they used to take frozen butter and roll it really thin and then put it back in the fridge and in and out to get big sheets of butter, and it was a real pain. Here's a way to make croissants, get the nice layers that's caused by putting butter between layers without having to do all that manipulation of the butter. We'll start off by taking the dough out of the bowl, putting it on a floured work surface, and we want to roll it out to about a 6 by 8 inch rectangle. The reason you'd let it rest for 10 minutes is this would be impossible to do if you didn't let the dough slacken up a bit. But we'll just keep going. There we go. Now, as I say, you're looking for a rectangle, which is when you're rolling is sometimes hard to do. But first we'll make sure it's about 8 inches wide. It's a little wide there. Now, just stretch it with your fingers to make a rough rectangle. There we go. So as you can see, it's not an exact perfect rectangle, but it's close enough. Now, here's where the trick with the butter comes. What I did is, before I started this a few hours ago, I put a half cup or 125 milliliters of butter into my freezer. I cut it into 3 sections first because I'm going to be using it in thirds. So just let me get my butter. And as you can see, I have 3 pieces of frozen butter. The reason you freeze it is that lets you be able to grate it. So we're just going to run the frozen butter through the coarse part of a grater. It'll just crumble right up, which is what you're looking for. There we go. Nice crumbly butter. Now, we want to take that butter and we want to put it in the center of the dough, leaving about a quarter of the dough on each end because we're going to be folding it over. So we'll just put that over the dough. Oh, I do love butter. And once you've got it over the dough, try to get it right out to the edges. Just like that. Now, you're going to fold this into the middle, and you're going to fold the other side into the middle to cover the butter. And then we're going to turn it, and we're going to roll it out to make it 6 inches by 8 inches again. It's a little easier to maintain a rectangle this time. So there we go, about 8 inches, a little bit wider. It's these layers of butter that give it the layers and the flaky texture that is synonymous with a great croissant. So we'll just grate up our second pat of butter. There we go. Now, I got a little narrow here, so we'll just stretch that out a bit more. Once again, put it down a half width down the middle, just like that. And then fold that into the middle, fold that into the middle, give it a turn, and we're going to roll it out to 6 by 8 again. There we are. Pretty good for the 8. Need a little bit more for the 6. There we go. Now we have one more pat of butter. So we'll give it one more scrape out. Now, you'll note there's an awful lot of butter going into this recipe. You do not eat croissants if you're planning on trying taking butter out of your recipe. By definition, they're just rich and creamy in the center with a crisp outside, so you're going to need lots of butter. There we go. Okay, so once again, we'll put it down that middle section of the dough. There we go. And it's not any great surprise. What we're going to do now is fold it into the middle. Fold it into the middle and give it one more roll out into 6 by 8. A little short yet, and definitely needs to be a bit wider. wider. And just square it up into a nice rectangle. And there you have a nice piece of croissant dough. Now I'm just going to wrap this in some plastic wrap, and it's going to go in the fridge overnight. Again, that'll help it rest up and let the yeast do its job. And we'll come back tomorrow and bake some croissants. I'll see you then. So I let my dough sit in the fridge wrapped in plastic wrap overnight. Just gives it a nicer texture and lets the yeast do a bit of work. It's slower in the fridge though. And now it's time to form it into croissants. So we'll just take it out of the plastic. And I floured my work surface here. And we're going to put it down on the work surface. Now, we're going to want to roll it out to about 12 by 8 inches. There we go. So we'll just give it a roll. There's some air bubbles in there. Don't worry about them. They'll work their way out in the process. So let's have a look here. That's just a little short now. See, it's sticking in there. Just stretch that out to try and make it a square. Doesn't have to be an exact square, but how's it this way? Needs to be a little bit more rolled this way. There we go. We'll just stretch it square. And it doesn't have to be an exact rectangle, but just get it as close as you can. And we'll just give it a roll. It's a little thicker on that end. Here we go. So now that you've got sort of a rectangle, what I want you to do is grab the top of the rectangle and move it about 3 inches over to make a parallelogram. Sort of like that. You want to make it a little bit of an angle because we're going to be cutting it. Now it's shortened up a bit with me messing around on it that, so we'll just roll it back out again. There we go. And as you can see, it's now more of an angled parallelogram shape, which is what you're looking for. And what we're going to do is make sure we got 8 inches, a little bit less. You do have to be careful because when you manipulate it, it tends to shrink down. So, what we're going to do is cut it at an angle in half to make 2 squares. So, we just have to be roughly half at the same angle, just like that. And we'll set one of the parallelograms aside, and we'll take the other, and we'll turn it so it's long this way. Now, what we're going to do is cut it in half, again, the same way between the 2 angles, just sort of like that. And then we're going to cut from one corner and cut it diagonal. And you'll end up with 4 little triangles, just like that. So you got 4 little triangles. Now, what you're going to do is take the wide edge and roll it. Just roll it into a nice croissant shape like that, and bend it to be a croissant shape. And then we're going to put it on a baking pan that I sprayed with some baking spray. And we'll just do that with all 4 of them. And now that they're shaped, I'm going to do the same thing with the other half of the dough. But you'll notice I put them quite far apart on the tray. That's because they're going to puff up quite a bit. So I'm going to do the other half, and then I'm going to let them sit in a warm place for an hour and a half to do one last rise. So I'll see you in a minute. Remember the half whipped egg from the day before? We're going to brush it on the croissants after they've had their rise. So the croissants have sat under a towel for an hour and a half, and you can see they've kind of puffed up, which is exactly what you're looking for. Now, I preheated my oven to 425 degrees, and just going to fire these in there for about 12 to 14 minutes. We'll see how they do. Come back after they're cooked. So, I baked my croissants for 12 minutes. They got a nice golden color, which is what you're looking for, and you want to take them off the trays and put them on a plate. Let them sit for at least 10 minutes before you serve them. It just lets the flaky crust set up. So we'll just let those cool. So they've cooled down. Of course, now we have to try one. So we'll just take one of the croissants, and a good test is to just break it in half and have a look at the center. And if it's all nice layered and flaky like that, then you've succeeded. But the real test, of course, is giving it a taste. A nice, crispy, flaky, pastry-type crust around soft, moist, lovely filling of layered bread with all that butter in it. This tastes absolutely great. But as they say in France, vous pouvez le faire. You can make it.
I have a good woman. I ain't good looking, but I do some cooking. I'm the old fat guy. So use that oven if you want some lovin'. Be like the old fat guy. Be like the old fat guy.